Welcome to Meeple, uniting players around the world. A 30-minute exploration of PJ and Gareth's board game experiences from across both sides of the Atlantic. Each episode they share their thoughts and opinions on the world of board games, including their favourite themes, games, hot topics, and much, much more.
Hey guys, and welcome to episode 97 of Board Game Revolution. Today we're going to talk about AI in art and the ethics behind it as it affects the board game community. And as always, I am PJ.
And I'm Gareth.
We are back together. Can you believe it? This is great.
Honestly, I didn't know I could cope last week without you. Doing the intro itself was a pressure that I haven't got to this week. But we have got a guest with us.
We do. This week we've got Chris. Chris, how are you?
I'm good.
So you chose this topic for us to talk about.
I suggested it. You agreed to it.
And I think it's something really interesting because we were having a preamble before the show and we were talking about AI and I use it at work and we're trying to work out those boundaries of when it's right and wrong. So I think as we talk through this episode, we'll get some good discussion around the use of AI. And Chris, what's your background in terms of how this AI in the board game industry might affect you or could affect you, or just AI in general affects because I think you're an artist.
Yeah, so I have worked in the film industry, spent over 10 years doing graphic design, social media, web design, web management. And so a lot of what the public sees, AI generative content, has a direct effect on what I've spent 15 years doing.
Have you seen a shift? How recently has AI started to be a significant shift in terms of maybe art production? Is it since like ChatGPT and Gen AI's appeared, or had you seen things coming before then?
That's a tough question. Graphic design hasn't been my main thing for about 3 years now.
Okay.
So I haven't been as head down in that world. But I think we've seen a lot of stuff pervading popular culture these days. I mean, it's hard to go a day without seeing somebody share an AI thing on Facebook, and a lot of people think it's real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're sharing it probably from an honest point of view, but I sit there looking at it and saying, your whole point is missed on me because of what I would call the fake artwork of their post.
Yeah, I guess there's a kind of AI aware. You kind of, if you kind of know what signals to look for, either the tone of the script or the style of the artwork, which is, I think we're going to talk about some of the games that have got AI in them.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Chris, and you are a gamer as well, so
correct.
What's your favorite game?
Oh, that's an unfair question, Gareth.
That is an unfair question. What is that?
Just keeps the board game theme going, and we're going to go rock into.
Sure. Well, I did the Pub Meeple ranking back at the beginning of the year, so I'll just go with that. The number one game for me at the time was Scholars of the South Tigris.
Oh, good choice.
Mm.
That is a meaty affair as well.
Yeah,
I like that game.
Little Shem Phillips there for you. Wow.
Yeah. Right, PJ, where are we going? Where do you want to start on this episode then?
So I thought we'd start with just a little bit of background on Chris, just to introduce you to our listeners so they know where you're coming from. Tell us about, how'd you get into the modern gaming as a hobby, and then you can extrapolate as an artist as well, however you want to tackle that.
Well, as far as gaming goes, I grew up playing games. Anytime our family was together, we were playing dominoes, cards, all sorts of games. I used to play Sorry with my aunt all the time when I was a kid. And so games have always been a part of my life. And the same for my wife. So when we started hanging out, we would play gin while we sat and ate lunch or ate dinner. We would play hand and foot canasta anytime we had friends over. And So it was an easy jump into the hobby when one of my best friends came over one day and was like, "Hey, I've got this game I want you to play." And we played it, had a good time with it. And shortly thereafter, the friend that got him into the hobby, they came over to my house, brought Terraforming Mars.
Yeah.
And this is like the second or third game that I played in the hobby. I didn't understand what was happening for 3 hours.
Amazing.
But as soon as it was over, I knew I needed more.
Yeah, I need more. Yeah.
And that was end of 2016, around Christmas time. And it's just grown from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned that you were an artist. I think you said in our pre-conversation that you were a graphic designer. Have you done any work in the game community? Is there any artwork in games that we would see or know about?
I wish.
Okay.
I've tried. When I was transitioning out of my job in New Orleans, I had applied for several board game company opportunities. And even since then, I've applied for some as well. But, it's all about who you know, probably. And
yeah,
I have some friends in the industry, but none in that regard that have panned out for a job.
And is it is it permanent roles or is it a lot of freelance?
It depends.
Yeah.
There's a lot of job postings. Hey, we've got this project we need help on.
Right.
But then there's a lot of companies that one of the things that I've applied for several positions is a marketing graphic designer.
Right. Yeah.
And not so much working on the games themselves, but working on promoting the games and sell sheets and convention graphics and promotional materials for the company and their games. So maybe one day. I did help open a game store here in Oklahoma a couple years ago and was a part of that for about a year and a half and have since moved on to do some other things.
So I thought that was a great. Let's just jump into AI, right? So you're an artist. You're trying to get into the industry. How do you see AI changing, evolving the industry from an artist's standpoint?
That's a heavy question.
Yeah.
I brought it on myself, so I think there's several things and there's several layers to that question. From an art standpoint, and this may be controversial for some people, and spoiler alert, I have a very harsh opinion against AI artwork. I think it cheapens the games. I think it doesn't put out as good of a product as a human arted game because there's no emotion and life experience and passion behind it. So that's one layer. I think it cheapens it. I think it also brings up a huge ethical dilemma where typically these generated images are compiling pieces of art from all over the internet. And it's taking pieces of human produced artwork and compiling them into something different. And in doing that, the original artists receive no credit or compensation. And there's questions about breaking copyright laws because of original artwork. And so I think that brings up the big ethical thing inside of artwork. And that I think for me too, and we'll get into this more later probably, is it's more than just board gaming. I mean, AI is changing our world right now. And the question is, in good ways or bad ways?
It's probably both, I think.
That's fair.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I think, I mean, we were chatting around whether we use this outside of, board gaming and we use AI a lot where I work, usually for either trying to do some deep analytics and things that we haven't got the capability for, but always with a word of caution about whether where we're reading the data from. So we try to not use external sources and build it off our own data set, knowing where that's come from, back to the ethics. But also places where we haven't got maybe the skill set or the manpower. So we've built quite a few models, but it's always to try and either improve the workflow, but doesn't often end up in front of a customer.
Right.
So it's that kind of learning element to it. When I get close to the board games, or to Chris's point about the artwork, I do. You can tell. I mean, I don't know whether it's obvious, but I tried making a logo for Board Game Meeple using DALL-E, but it just doesn't. It's got a look to it that you just know it's not that human touch, which I guess is that artistic integrity that Chris was mentioning. It's not coming from its own inspirational area. It's coming from thousands or millions, probably billions. I don't know images there are that it's been trained on. But there's always that look. And even if you say, like, I want a futuristic look, or I want a medieval, they all have that same, I can't describe it, kind of look to it.
It's like this filter that covers it.
Yeah.
And it just looks fake.
Yeah, it just looks fake. And I'm thinking earlier about the games that we have, and I know that Paths of Civilization had a lot of debate. I think it was Essen released last year. I think it was last year.
Yeah, last fall sometime.
Yeah, where the artwork is, I think in the majority is AI led. But Chris, I think you were saying that it has had some touching up or some artistic overlays to it. But
so it mentions it in the rule book, and if I can just read it real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Because it brings up a good question, I think.
Yeah.
It said, image banks, photographs, artificial intelligence generations, or works from the public domain may have been used as working elements in the design or development of certain graphical and textual aspects of the game. So it's not just artwork there. The elements of this game are not the result of a simple request to an artificial intelligence. Instead, they are the product of an artistic direction process that includes compositing, editing, and careful retouching by real humans with real bits of neurons.
Yeah, I mean, it's so loose, isn't it? It's really vague.
But obviously they know it's an issue because they're saying at the end,
at least
real humans with real neurons. They went a little dramatic with it.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So I think
that brings up a gray area.
It's really grey, because how much of that card is it 5% AI or is it 95% AI?
Right.
How much did you pay for the card? Did you pay, I don't know what a card's artwork. Let's make it up. It's £100 a card. But but how much that money actually went to the artist, or did they save the money? Now I think as a not an artist, and if I was the beginning of that sentence, it said in the development. I think at that point, if I had to design a game and needed some ideas, I would use AI to help give me some creativity that then you'd pass on to an artist for real that said, this is kind of the ideas I have.
Yeah.
Just to get me moving more than me scribbling something on a bit of paper, which I can assure you would be terrible. But it's that fine line. It's not a fine line. There is a line when it becomes a replacement for the artist versus supporting a process to try and get to an end result.
Yeah.
I think that's the key, is support versus replacement, right? I think what I picked up on when you were reading that, a couple things I noticed is, so I talked about public domain, which got me to thinking about fair use and copyright law, which in my line of work is really prevalent and important in records management and archiving. So I was also thinking about Dan Halligan from Obsession, right?
Yeah.
Gareth, if you remember when he was on, he talked about how he used public domain images, and that helped direct the theme of that game. And here's how we insert Obsession into episode.
I'm impressed. AI, 18th century board gaming. We got there.
Right. But he used public domain images for a lot of his artwork, which, and I have no problem with that. Of course, I think he's putting together the overall work. And I think that's where we get into the, does AI support or does it replace, right? I think that's
quite a good experiment to go, let's take some of those cards and see if you said, create me an 18th century picture of a, I don't know, aristocrat, what would it look like? And you just know.
And then compare it.
Compare it to, I guess, original artwork or drawings from the time.
So it's interesting. There's a podcast that I've listened to a few times called Daily Creative. Nothing to do with board games. But on a recent episode, he had Andy Crouch on. And he talked about the difference between tools and devices. Mm-hmm. And I think his thoughts there apply pretty much across the board when you consider AI. Because they're talking about technological advancements and if they're helping or hindering us as a society. So Andy said, devices are meant to replace human effort and skill, substituting something humans used to do. So devices become a substitute for human work, whereas tools are meant to be implements in people's hands that require practice, skill, and effort. And I think as we talk about this, and we've already kind of hinted at it, right?
Yeah.
Is it a tool that we can use to enhance or help in some way?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the danger of it is it's already becoming a device that is replacing human work.
Right.
And that's the danger. And that's why it's such a big, important topic. Mm-hmm. And not everybody thinks that. I see on some of the Board Game Geek threads for Path of Civilization, and another big one that really started the conversation in the board gaming world was the More Terraforming Mars Kickstarter last fall.
Right.
And there are people that don't care. And they say, what does it matter to me? I just want my game and I want to have fun.
Yep.
But it does matter because it is becoming such a big deal in so many facets of our world.
What happened on Terraforming Mars? I'm clearly missed the entire...
So right before they launched their Kickstarter for, I think it was More Terraforming Mars, which was just a bunch of promo content, extra maps that had previously been fan-made.
Right.
Kickstarter instituted a policy that creators have to be upfront with the use of AI in their project. And so they had to be honest about it. And it was really the first time that I was made aware of this being a thing in the board game world. And the conversation exploded. You had prominent other publishers going to social media. Patrick Leader from Leader Games called them out like really harshly and said when they used clip art, which Terraforming Mars artwork's always been terrible.
Yeah.
And that was some people's argument is AI art is an improvement for that game. But Patrick Leader said when they used clip art in previous versions, I turned up my nose and just played the game. I'm astounded that they found a way to make the situation worse, but here we are.
Yeah. Right.
And then he talked about how the game industry is based on the efforts of creative and talented folks, and the system is built to make us as cheap as possible. Many designers accept the risk by only getting paid if their game is signed. Further pushing artists out of the system further trivializes the artistic expression of the form. By supporting it, you're just going to continue seeing this race to the bottom.
Right.
And there was another publisher that called it out and said they were infuriated and disappointed over it. And they said there's no ethical use of AI art for profit. And I think that's where the kicker comes in.
Yeah, I think that tools and device, and then is it for profit and the usage, those two. Yeah. I do the piece around is it a tool or is it a device to improve things? And then tied to your point about making money from it.
Because you look at that Terraform Mars Kickstarter, they made over $2.2 million. That was my next question.
Yep.
And almost 20,000 backers.
clearly not that
Now
much of a
again,
concern.
that game has not historically had great art, and they used, clip art. That was my brain stopped. And they've used clip art and stock images, and it's never been good. But they've taken a step further to bring up a question of ethical.
Right. Mm. So is it that they replaced the clip art and the stock art with AI art? Was that the swing they did?
To my knowledge, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was gonna back the Kickstarter until I saw that, because, like I mentioned, Terraforming Mars is one of my first games.
Mm-hmm.
I've bought everything for it, and it still has a place on my shelf today.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, I said, I'm not going to support this Kickstarter because I have such a staunch stance against AI art, and like I said, for profit. That's the thing. Yeah. Because how many designers out there are using it for prototyping and playtesting? Because I know PJ's a huge playtester. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's hard to get into the game because it's just white pieces of paper, and so if you can take a little bit of time to add a touch to your prototype, it might get noticed more, you might get better feedback. But are you going to take that and use it to make the money off of with the final product?
PJ, see that playtesting point. Have you had any playtesting where they've used AI artwork? And if you haven't, would you want them to declare that on a little sign on a table when you were testing?
So, not to my knowledge. Like, I've always made the assumption, but now AI is something I have to incorporate into my mindset to ask when I get a print and play, prototype. So I don't know. No one has ever been up front and said, hey, this is AI art. To your second question, would I want them to let me know? I think yes. And for the sole reason of, while I have no answers to any of the questions we've been talking about, I say yes because I believe at my core, open debate. And that's what I love about this. I think that this is an important topic for us to talk about, and do it in an intelligent and calm way so that we can breed some form of resolution and accord. And back to our, the purpose of this podcast, uniting players around the world. And I think AI touches all of us. That seems to be the thesis of this episode. AI affects all of us, not just in gaming, but in everything else. And I think at the core is the tools versus the device, right? So if you're using it as a tool for a prototype, I would probably do the same as a terrible artist myself. I would probably go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use AI art for my prototype, but I would be upfront with my play testers and not let it become a device because, I think that's important.
Because then in the rule book, either you would just say AI was used to inspire or help, but, or you don't mention it at all, because actually it has no impact on the artist who actually did the artwork.
Right.
It just gave them a brief, if you like, some scope to what kind of is in your head, but that's it.
Because any artwork comes from some sort of inspiration. I was just recently designed a logo for the new venture that we're doing. I looked at a ton of logo designs in that industry to see what direction I wanted to go and to find inspiration.
Yeah.
So I don't know that looking at it for inspiration is near as much of a gray area as taking it to print, right? That's where, and I don't know. It's also astounding to me because there's a Polygon article that interviewed the president of Indie Game Studios, which is one of the kind of co-publishers of Terraforming Mars. And one of his answers to the questions just blew me away. He said, using this as an automation tool to help certain aspects, it's certainly going to hurt people. Like, they're admitting, yeah, this has negative impacts and implications for the future of not just the board game industry. He said, this is where we're at. It's the growing pains stage. I don't think this is going to go back in the bag. It's too powerful a technology. It's used in too many places already. And he mentions a few. He said there's high-end luxury watch companies that are admitting to using this for their copywriting in their ads and also generating ideas for watches. There's a couple of studios out there on the TV side of things that are using AI as part of their development, and even news outlets that are using it to write their news stories. So, I mean, we're talking, what's the impact of careers, right? Things people studied for and have degrees in and years of experience, but we can just put it in a computer system and say, go find another job. That's where it's a problem. And then even the Fricks Games, which is the other kind of company behind Turbo Wars, the CEO, Enoch, said, I see no way to turn back time. Illustrators lose jobs for every new tool that is developed. Right? Like,
it's a little disingenuous because it's not absolutely true, but it is partially true. We see a lot of that. We see a lot of that in argumentation.
But they're just blatant and this is the effects and we're just going to do it.
I recently heard someone talking about AI on an NPR interview, is that AI is taking away, they're doing our art and creativity so that I can do my job. We want AI to do our jobs so that we're free to be artistic and creative, and it's having the opposite effect.
Do you know what do they mean by taking? Was it the correct? I don't quite get how an artist can say. Is it that they can churn out more work? Was there any? What was? I try to work out how what they saw as the awesome moment that it's doing their work for them, because I guess you're not doing any work if you're just telling a computer to here's a prompt and here's make me some art.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think this. So if Gareth, if you and I were to get together and co-design a board game, and we got this great idea, I think you and I would agree. We'd probably use AI because neither one of us are artists to get the things flowing, and then say, we know Chris is an artist. He's a graphic designer. I think after we've got it ready for development, I would then go to Chris and be like, here's our project, but scrap the art and design it from scratch. But then you would know what's in our head because we do not have the physical ability to artistically express our ideas. So using AI to do that for us, but then getting a human artist to do the work, I think is maintaining. Go ahead.
No, yeah, sorry, I didn't interrupt. I think I wouldn't want to give Chris the artwork. So I guess there's unconscious bias that because we've grown, we've maybe developed that game for 18 months, and even though we know it's AI, it might have become something that we've had good feedback on, we've had good times. You probably will not even give the artist that brief because I don't know, but because you become attached to things, even though it's wrong.
What do you think, Chris? Debate. What do you think if we were to put you in that hypothetical situation? Would you rather our AI art that we were working with, or would you rather not?
I mean, you would definitely, as an artist, need some sort of brief, even just a prompt you gave for the generator that you used, right? Medieval game set in a castle.
How did you know?
Catapults firing at your, archer turrets, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
You would need some sort of direction.
Of course.
Honestly, there may be times that I would want to see what you've been looking at.
Right.
Because there's been so many times working on projects where I've looked up inspiration and I've been like, that's it. That's the direction I want to go. That's the feel, the emotion. And I get into it and it just doesn't work. And I've got to start over from scratch and go a completely different direction. That's what I ended up doing with the logo for our new business. Caitlin and I mocked some stuff up, and I said, this is what we're doing. I got into it. It looked terrible, and I didn't like it at all. And so I kind of scrapped it and restarted, and where we ended turned out great, and I'm really proud of it.
You know, I think I take it back, Gareth. You're absolutely right. When I published my first book, I had a friend of mine design the book cover, and I had a distinct idea in my head, and I described it to him. He's like, okay. So he's like, let's try and put it together. And it looked terrible. When I gave him the freedom, when I gave the artist the freedom, it's amazing. I love it. It's gorgeous. I wouldn't do it again. So if you're listening, Israel, I'm going to give you a plug. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. And I've learned, trust the artist, not the AI.
And I can relate to that. I mean, as a creative individual in the long-time job that I was in down in New Orleans, one of the guys that was there that oversaw what I didn't give me a lot of freedom and was very critical of a lot of things. And he moved on to another thing. And after he left, I felt so free because now the people supervising me didn't hold as tight of a leash and invited me into the planning and the dreaming and the whole process. And it just gave me so much more freedom. And I feel like I put out some of my best work in there in those years because I didn't feel as like squelched and I don't think he did it intentionally, right? That's the hard part in a job like that. Sometimes non-creative people don't understand how to lead creative people well. That's a whole separate conversation.
No, you're right. We don't.
No, we don't. You know,
we do not.
Give me data points.
But it can still apply because maybe some of these publishers haven't had good experience with artists, and they said, "Why would I spend the money dealing with this difficult person? Not because they're difficult, because you didn't understand them. So why would I spend all that money and time when I can just get one person to type a prompt in and not have to pay for anything?"
Yeah.
Fun.
Yep.
So a couple of weeks ago, I started a test, which some people may have noticed on my Instagram channel, when I started thinking about this topic of AI. And I tested, I think, about 7 posts now of just asking it to help me write a game summary. So back to that thing, is it a tool, is it a device? What does it produce that I wouldn't produce or couldn't produce? And I did a few edits with the prompt and ask it to add things in. It's more in my style, like I use emojis, show me the pros, show me the cons, taking my own review format as an input. And no one's called me out on it, where they haven't noticed over the last 7 days. Anyone would like to feedback to me, it would be welcome. Just see if anybody had noticed that because it's not quite in my style. And the reason I tested it is because I hear more and more about Instagram wanting written form more than just, hey, it's a game, it's terraforming Mars, I love it. A few hashtags. They're saying you have to put more content. And I haven't got the time in my life to write a lot of scripts. Back to outside factors. It made a blind bit no difference at all. So my like count, my engagement is pretty much the same. Okay. So I've kind of it was an experiment on 2 fronts. A, can AI help me produce content? And B, does it make a difference to any kind of reach? By writing more writing more engaging content, but it hasn't. So we'll be going back to normal production now.
I need to go read through those now.
Yeah, go have a read. The last, I think it's about seven posts. It's about a week and a half. But if you go back past that, you'll see that generally I write that much, and now there's that much.
Interesting.
But writing tools and devices, to me, it was a tool to help me get more content out. And I did it. I always edited it and changed words because it wasn't my language.
Right.
But could you script it? I did do some experiments that if I was in a YouTube world, I asked it to write me some creative scripts for, like, if I was filming, I'm going to do like a 10-minute run through. I was quite impressed how it gave me some structure. Obviously, it isn't going to replace me doing the video work. You still got to be creative. But again, for somebody who's not done YouTube or thought about doing a how-to play, it was quite useful and giving me a bit of a framework that I would have to go and tackle. So it's got it is a fine balance of, do you use it to replace creativity, or do you use it to help you be more creative?
Right.
But that's my little experiment over the last 10 days or so. 7 posts. But no one, either people are talking about it on DMs and not messaging me, or no one gives a blind. Well, back to your Terraforming Mars, 20,000 people, was it? Just got on with it. So have a read, and please feedback on Instagram if you've got thoughts on that. Yeah,
I mean, these are real concerns, especially for us, because as we're reaching episode 100, we are discussing moving to YouTube or video recording. We haven't landed on anything yet, although time's running short. But right, and then we've got this logo we've got to rethink, because the whole meeple and the copyright or trademark with Carcassonne and all. So it's like all of these things are relevant to our podcast, and yet, what do we do, and what do we land on, and how do we do it ethically and responsibly?
Yeah, I wouldn't change the logo because of that. We need just a refresh anyway.
Yeah.
But, anywhere else?
Interesting too. I was just thinking while you were talking about that, Gareth. I think art in board games in the past 8 years is one of the reasons the hobby has exploded like it has. I was kind of on the beginning wave of it just becoming this massive worldwide thing. And I think a large part of it is some of the artwork. Some of these games and these artists are just putting out beautiful pieces that just enhance your game. I think 15 years ago, nobody would have cared, because you had games like Puerto Rico, Castles of Burgundy, all the old dry Euro games that they didn't care about the art, and it could look terrible and people still played them. But people care now. And that's why right now it's as big of a deal as it is.
Yeah. We had some friends over last week who are relatively new to Instagram. And I guess I was like 12 years. I think it counts 13 years this year. Yeah. And in that time, that difference, the popularity, as you say, Chris, the difference in the artwork, and the impact that has on games. It's one of the first things I guess you visually see when you turn on a Kickstarter page is the art.
Yep.
But has Kickstarter got a marker for again anything that says it's been generated by AI? There's no, they haven't gone down an avenue yet of highlighting an AI driven project. I noticed on Instagram there's now a little tag if your art is using AI. You're supposed to switch on. I sat there thinking, well, do I turn that marker on for my written content? And I read all the bits and bobs. It was for art itself, not for the written word.
Interesting.
Which I thought was an interesting one.
It is interesting, yeah. I think to your point, Chris, how many of these older games have been refreshed? All they did was refresh the art. Right?
Yeah.
Seven Wonders got a refresh.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico's about to.
I think it's a million. It's a million already in about 3 or 4 days.
And Castles of Burgundy a couple years ago.
I mean, let's talk about Catan. How many times it's been the artwork? It looks so different. Like mine is back from '99, and it's atrocious. You try to put it together with something today, and it's like.
I know the box you mean. Well, I think I've gotten about the same era. Yeah,
the 3D version that came out with a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
right. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
What about designers? About AI? So if I was back to the prototyping, I've got art. I haven't got art, but if I wanted to do, I don't know, checking balance and mechanics, maybe letting them. if there's a lot of algorithms going through, because some designers just use a spreadsheet, don't they, to work out the balance?
Yeah.
Would you use, is AI okay to use those examples to try and test different mechanics? I haven't heard of any designers using AI, but I suspect it's happening.
I think
if
so.
If it hasn't, it will happen.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to our conversation about tools versus devices, right?
Yeah.
I think if it's a tool to supplement the creativity and the balancing and the process, then that's acceptable.
Yeah.
But once it substitutes, I think AI becomes dangerous when it substitutes human agency. Ooh, that was good, right? Yeah. I think that's when AI is a threat. And take threat, however you mean that, but it becomes a cautionary tale. Yeah.
Well, as some of this playtest said, I know you've played a ton of prototype games. Could it help? Sure. But it's never going to replace someone sitting at your table,
right,
playing the game and interacting with it physically.
Right.
AI can't replace that. Just like in artwork, it can't replace the passion, life, and experience and emotion that an artist can put into a piece of art.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I completely agree. You can't not get human playtesters when you're in the process of developing a board game. AI can't play test the game for you and just be like, it's balanced, go ahead and publish, right? Like,
now, the one benefit I could see, though, is it's not bringing a bias.
Right.
That if I'm playtesting a game with mechanics that I don't like, I'm already going into it expecting it to be bad.
Right.
So there may be a benefit there, but it's still not going to replace the human interaction.
You've still got the bias within the AI itself anyway. There's a risk.
Exactly.
Everything it's learned was from people who hate card drafting games. I just thought of another one. I was thinking about work and about AI. Localization of rulebooks. So that's always a sticking point. A lot of English produced board games is that if you want it in another language, there's somebody else another publisher picks it up.
Right.
But actually, we've got offices in other countries and talking about how we do some translation, and that did come up. Not that we've done it, but does that speed up the localization because it understands other languages?
But does it? But does it understand the colloquialisms?
From what I've seen, yes. Not perfect, but better than Google Translate, which is terrible.
It is
at picking up the nuances of the words. But I was just thinking about that's always only because I think I've seen 2 in Kickstarter updates in the last 24 hours where localization is the bit that's slowing them down.
Right.
But again, that replaces translators and localization specialists.
I mean, because
it's far-reaching across the whole industry, isn't it? Where that that's a tool to help translate, but you still want a native speaker.
You do
to review
absolutely
to get it to make sure that it's got it right.
Because not only colloquialisms, you have nuance in language, nuance in emotions of the communicator and the receiver of the communication, and I think that's really important. And I don't know that AI can fully substitute that.
Yeah, no, agreed.
And it goes back to the profit question too.
Yeah.
Are they using it to save money, to make more money? Because let's be honest, Path of Civilization, I would love to talk to them and ask them, if you had paid artists to do all the artwork, are you going to charge more money? Or are you putting that game out there at the price right now? Because I think it's $65, $70 game. Because that's the price of that type of game, that size, that many components, regardless of your art costs. And so the same thing could be said for localization and...
great. Yeah, anything where you're trying to take task out of the process. Yeah, I was just looking up how much it was. It's basically £70. £70 over here. That's for what is mostly cards.
Mm-hmm.
That's reasonably expensive.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth that.
if it is reducing costs, I say somebody's got their bottom line. They've got a nice bit of gross profit at the back of there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be an interesting breakdown to see.
So I think we're at that point. The question is, Gareth, what does AI have to say about AI?
So I did do a test because I asked it to give me pros and cons of AI in artwork, and its pros was efficient art creation to help generate concepts and background, freeing up time for artists to focus on key pieces, which I think kind of you mentioned. Helps do iterative design, so helps do variations, and then cost efficiency. But the pro stuff is pretty much where our conversation is sat, which is the loss of artistic integrity, job displacement, and legal and ethical issues around copyright originality concerns. I did ask it for a title of the episode, but they were reasonably average, so we won't be going with those. So it's failed. But again, it was a very weak prompt. I asked it. I didn't ask for anything more than a sentence.
Right.
Which I think is where sometimes I'm trying to get a bit of knowledge, and Google takes you places, it doesn't always tell you what you're trying to understand.
Right.
Here, at least it gives you a bit of a framework, but it's back to that tools advices point. It's brilliant. What you do with it and how you use it, and whether you're using it just for back to that frameworking and maybe helping you do something different, or whether you're taking it as is and back to Chris's point, making a profit,
right?
Or replacing somebody else's task or job.
Yeah. Any other final points, Chris?
I think for me, where the whole conversation comes down to the point, and it's not just in board games, life as a whole, is technology, AI should be a tool to help improve and enhance our lives.
Yep.
It shouldn't be something that is used to replace jobs, to put people out of jobs, to save money, to make more money, right? It should be helping us as individuals, as a society, as a culture, as a world, to grow and improve our lives. It doesn't seem to be trending that way. It seems to be trending the opposite, to where it's putting people out of jobs or helping companies cut corners and make more money. And the question I've thought, and I haven't come to any conclusions on, is how can it be used for the betterment of the world?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's use it to cure cancer, not to put artists out of jobs, right?
Right. Curing cancer.
So, PJ,
don't know how that would happen, but
I'm sure they're using AI.
Sure.
Have you got an AI themed reading back of the rule book to do, or have you just chosen a random game this week?
No, as usual.
I forgot to tell our listeners last week, which was terrible because I actually wrote it down in my script, what the last 2 episodes were.
Yes.
I was going to read one out, which I then failed. So mine was going to be Middle Ages.
This is the problem. This is what happens when Gareth and I go solo without each other, because I messed up for 2 weeks, and then Gareth was supposed to tell everybody and do a voiceover, and he forgot. Yeah, we need each other. We can't rely on AI. We have to rely on... So, first of all, let's go back 2 weeks. River Valley Glassworks was the game that I had read from 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, when John was on, I read from the game Reef.
That's it.
Yeah. And then you were going to read from Middle Ages, but forgot to do the reading.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Now people got the answer. But
sure,
it was a good description.
Do you want to do the reading?
It's downstairs.
Okay. All right. So I've got one now. Chris will let you guess on air, and I'll tell you after we're done recording.
see how confident my guess is first.
Yeah.
They're pretty easy for the most part, I think. Anyway. You and your fellow players take on the role of gardeners, seeking to wield your green thumb to grow a well-balanced, mature garden before the growing season ends. Over the course of the game, you will be planting seedlings and growing a variety of plants to fill out your garden. In addition, if you are able to meet the complex growing condition of your flowers, you will earn prestige points for your horticultural achievements. The player who earns the most prestige at the end of the game will be crowned the Master Gardener. Dun, dun, dun!
Was it flowers or was it vegetables?
I believe it was mentioned as flowers and seedlings.
Flowers, yeah.
Flowers and seedlings.
I thought of a game, but it's vegetables.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, tune in next week and you will get the answer. Okay, now so I'm staring at y'all just trying to think about it. It's okay.
I'm going to have to go and think about that one.
Yep.
I feel as if I know it. Do I know it?
You should.
Oh, I think I have a thought. I'll ask
you should. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Right then. Well, thanks, Chris, for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me.
A really good conversation. I hope our listeners enjoyed it. Thanks, PJ. Good to see you.
Absolutely.
If we're going to do some video, we better work out because we've got 3 episodes to go. What we're going to do.
I know.
Don't worry.
I know.
I have a cunning plan.
Ooh,
right.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, and we will speak to you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please subscribe, and as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. So make sure to leave those in the comments. And don't forget, you can also chat with us both on Instagram at Meeple to Meeple.